The Eastern Front was dying, but it wasn't quiet. By the summer of 1943, the fields of Kursk had been scorched into a graveyard of metal. Tigers, T-34s, and Panthers littered the land like the remains of an extinct species. What had once been the thunder of blitzkrieg was now a slow, grinding roar, a war of attrition where machines aged faster than their crews. Germany's armored spearhead, the weapon that once shattered continents, was beginning to dull. The Tiger I, once the terror of every Soviet tanker, was no longer the invincible beast it had been in 1942. Soviet gunners had learned. New shells, new tactics, and the arrival of the improved 85mm guns on T-34 divided by 85s meant the myth of invulnerability was fading. And so, deep within the war factories of Germany, a new monster was conceived. It would not just match the enemy, it would dominate them utterly. The Tiger II, known to its crews as the Königstiger, the King Tiger, weighing nearly 70 tons, it was the heaviest operational tank of the Second World War. Its frontal armor, 180mm thick, sloped at a precise angle, was virtually immune to anything short of direct artillery fire. Its gun, the 88mm KWK-43, could destroy any Allied tank at distances over 2 kilometers. It was, on paper, the apex of tank evolution, the ultimate answer to the Soviet horde. But perfection in design came with a price. It demanded precision engineering in an economy now collapsing under bombs. Its engine strained under its own weight, its fuel thirst unmatched, and its production so slow that only a few hundred would ever leave the factory floor. Each Tiger II was a masterpiece and a liability. Across the front, the Red Army watched the German armor evolve and adapted with terrifying speed. The Soviets had never built tanks for beauty or complexity. Their machines were tools designed to be simple, fast, and replaceable. But by 1943, even the T-34 had its limits. Against a Tiger I, its shells often bounced off harmlessly. Against the new Königstiger, it would be suicide. So, a new beast began to take shape inside the Soviet design bureaus. It would carry the weight of the Red Army's vengeance. A tank powerful enough to face Germany's iron giants head-on. That tank was the Iosif Stalin series, the IS-1, IS-2, and ultimately the IS-2 model 1944. If the Tiger II was born from precision, the IS-2 was born from necessity. Its 122mm gun was massive, originally an anti-aircraft weapon retooled for tank use. It fired slower than the German 88mm, but its shells could tear through fortifications, crush bunkers, and punch through the thickest armor at close range. The gun wasn't elegant, it was brutal. The IS-2's armor was thick, but not impenetrable. Its design philosophy was different. It didn't seek perfection. It sought victory. Where the Tiger II demanded maintenance and fuel, the IS-2 demanded only men and courage. This was the contrast that defined the last years of the war. Germany built machines to last forever. The Soviet Union built machines to win today. As 1944 approached, both armies prepared to unleash their new creations. The Germans, believing quality would triumph over quantity, poured their resources into a few hundred King Tigers, each one a fortress on tracks. The Soviets, knowing that numbers and simplicity had already saved them once at Moscow and Stalingrad, focused on producing thousands of IS-series tanks and improving logistics to keep them moving forward. On the battlefield, these doctrines would collide, and Europe itself would tremble. But first came the transition, a changing of the guard on both sides. In Germany, veterans who had served in the Tiger I now faced a new kind of training. The Tiger II was not simply a tank, it was a system. Crews needed to learn its complex gearbox, its delicate Maybach engine, and its temperamental suspension. What they gained in protection, they lost in reliability. In the Soviet Union, IS-2 crews came from T-34 battalions, men accustomed to speed and maneuver. The IS-2 was slower, heavier, but immensely powerful. For many, firing its massive gun for the first time felt like taming thunder itself. Each nation believed they had finally achieved the decisive weapon, the hammer that would end the war. Yet war had changed. The great tank duels of 1941 and 1942 were giving way to urban sieges, ambushes, and defensive collapses. Roads were shattered. Fuel was scarce. and above, Allied bombers ruled the skies. The Tiger II entered this chaos as an anachronism, a weapon from an earlier dream of conquest. The IS-2 entered it as an instrument of conclusion, built to end a war already won in blood. Still, destiny would bring them face to face. In the summer of 1944, on the plains of Poland, the Great Clash began. The Germans launched their final armored counterattacks, desperate to halt the Soviet advance. The Soviets rolled westward, their IS-2s leading the way through smoke and ruin. There, amid shattered villages and burning wheat fields, the two heaviest tanks of the war would finally meet, not as prototypes or rumors, but as reality. It was a meeting not just of machines, but of philosophies, one crafted with obsession, the other with urgency. The Tiger II, a masterpiece born too late. The IS-2, a weapon born just in time. The age of the heavy tank had reached its climax, and what came next would decide not only the fate of armies, but the legacy of every tank ever built thereafter. The summer of 1944 was a season of reckoning. Germany's war machine, once unstoppable, was retreating on every front. Yet, amid the ruins, a new terror rolled eastward. The Tiger II, now entering combat for the first time. Its presence alone was enough to send tremors through enemy reports. Soviet reconnaissance units began whispering of a new Tiger. Longer, heavier, deadlier. Seemed invincible, and for a brief moment it was. The Tiger II made its debut at the Sandomierz bridgehead in Poland, where the Red Army had established a foothold on the western bank of the Vistula River. The German High Command saw an opportunity to strike, to crush the Soviet bridgehead and restore the crumbling front. The 501st Heavy Tank Battalion was chosen. Among its ranks were 45 of the new Tiger IIs. They advanced in column formation, engines rumbling like thunder through the Polish countryside. At dawn, they met the Red Army's spearhead, a formation of T-34-85s supported by the new IS-2s. The clash was immediate, violent, and unforgettable. At over 2 kilometers, the Tiger II's 88mm gun opened fire. A T-34 was hit and vanished in a bloom of fire. Another followed. Soviet crews knew the rule: never duel a Tiger from the front. But even their flanking maneuvers were slowed by the thick summer mud. Then the IS-2s appeared, low, broad, moving steadily through the haze. Their 122mm guns roared, sending shells the size of a man's arm toward the German line. One shell struck a Tiger II's frontal plate. A clean hit, but it only gouged the surface. The German gunner returned fire. His round tore straight through the IS-2's turret, blowing it open like paper. In those first encounters, the King Tiger reigned supreme. Its armor was too thick, its gun too precise. Soviet gunners quickly realized they could not penetrate its front at long range. The only solution was to close the distance, to fight within 800 meters or less, where the 122mm could finally do its work. But closing distance meant death. German optics were unmatched, Zeiss lenses so sharp they could track a moving tank at extreme ranges. Soviet gunners aimed through simpler sights, often forced to rely on instinct and experience rather than instruments. For every Tiger II destroyed, several IS-2s and T-34s fell. Yet, the Germans soon learned a harsh truth. Victory on the map meant nothing if your machines could not move. The Tiger II's mechanical failures began almost immediately. Its transmission overheated. Its engines strained on inclines. One by one, the King Tigers broke down or ran out of fuel before even reaching the battlefield. What the Soviets couldn't kill, the roads did. By the end of the Sandomierz fighting, the 501st Battalion had lost nearly all its Tiger IIs, not to combat but to abandonment. Some were blown up by their own crews to prevent capture. When Soviet engineers examined the wrecks, they were astonished. Here was a tank more advanced than anything they had, but also one that demanded an industrial precision the Soviet Union could never afford during war. They respected it, but they did not envy it. Because while the Tiger II fought in handfuls, the IS-2 fought in armies. By late 1944, entire Guards heavy tank regiments were equipped with IS-2s. These were elite units, armored fists designed to smash through fortified lines. Their tanks were slower but easier to maintain, easier to replace, and capable of fighting under conditions that would immobilize any German machine. In combat, the IS-2's tactics were simple and brutal. A group of them would advance together, guns alternating fire. The first shell would shock the defenders. The second would break their will. The third would shatter whatever was left. Against the Tiger II, the IS-2's strength was not finesse, it was discipline and numbers. Each Soviet crew knew their machine's limits. Their reload time was long, their ammunition few, their armor vulnerable on the flanks. So they fought smart, using smoke, terrain, and overwhelming fire support to trap the German giants. And the battlefield changed with them. Urban warfare became the great equalizer. In cities like Budapest, Warsaw, and later Berlin, the Tiger II's long-range advantage vanished. Narrow streets, rubble, and ambushes turned every corner into a death trap. The IS-2, shorter and more maneuverable, could engage at close quarters where its 122mm gun had devastating effect. Even when the Tiger II destroyed several Soviet tanks in a duel, the Red Army simply sent more. It was an industrial war now, and Germany was running out of both oil and men. Still, for those who fought inside them, the Tiger II remained a marvel, the embodiment of German engineering pride. Crews trusted its armor like a fortress. They believed, sometimes rightly, that if they saw the enemy first, they would win. But the war was no longer about who had the better tank. It was about who could keep fighting. By the autumn of 1944, the Red Army's IS-2s had pushed into the Vistula Line and beyond. Soviet mechanics were learning how to repair and replace their tanks faster than ever before. Entire factories in the Urals were dedicated solely to producing IS hulls and 122mm guns. Meanwhile, Germany's factories lay in ruins. Allied bombers struck day and night. Each Tiger II built came at the cost of several Panther or Panzer IVs that never would. The German doctrine, quality over quantity, was collapsing under its own weight. Still, on the field, when the King Tiger appeared, everything stopped. Soviet soldiers described hearing its rumble long before seeing it. A single Tiger II could stall an entire Soviet regiment for hours. It was an armored god, but one with mortal flaws. The IS-2, by contrast, was a worker's tank, built with the cold efficiency of necessity. Its lines were crude, its welds rough, its optics basic. But it did not need perfection. It needed only to function, to fire, to move, to win. As both machines fought across Poland and into East Prussia, it became clear that the Tiger II and IS-2 were not just weapons, they were philosophies made steel. One represented the belief that mastery of engineering could defy reality. The other proved that simplicity and endurance could conquer even brilliance. By early 1945, the Red Army was at the gates of Germany. The Tiger II still roared, but its echo was fading. The IS-2 now led the advance, storming cities, crushing bunkers, and shattering what remained of the Wehrmacht's armored might. Both tanks had survived the fire, but only one would shape the future. Because as the final battles drew near, even the King Tiger's shadow began to fall. Winter, 1945. Europe was collapsing. From the skies came the endless drone of bombers. From the east came the endless march of Soviet steel. The Red Army now stretched from the Vistula to the Oder, a tidal wave of men and machines. And at the tip of that wave were the IS-2s. They rolled through Poland and East Prussia like iron hammers, leading columns of infantry and artillery across frozen rivers and blackened forests. Every town became a fortress, every mile a graveyard. Yet the Soviet advance did not stop. Ahead of them lay Berlin, the heart of the Reich. For the Germans, this was the twilight. Factories lay silent or buried under rubble. Fuel was precious, ammunition scarcer still. Yet in scattered depots and hidden hangars, a few Tiger IIs remained, Germany's last hope for defense. They were gathered into ad hoc units. Fragments of once great divisions, crews of boys and veterans alike, united by desperation. The King Tiger was still the most formidable tank on the planet, but now it was fighting ghosts, shadows of an army that no longer existed. When the Soviet vanguard reached the outskirts of Berlin, the final duels began. In the wreckage of villages like Silo and Halby, the two giants met one last time. The Tiger II's long 88mm gun spoke first, sharp, precise, devastating. Soviet tanks erupted in flame before they could even respond. The German gunners still had their skill, their discipline, their pride. But they were surrounded. IS-2s advanced through smoke and ruins, firing point-blank, their massive shells crushing walls and bunkers alike. German tankers fought from basements, from behind wrecked trams, from the rubble of homes. Each shot from a Tiger II echoed like thunder through the dying city. For a few moments it felt as if they could still hold back the tide. But the war had already been decided elsewhere, in the factories of the Urals, in the oil fields that Germany no longer controlled, in the skies ruled by Allied bombers. The King Tiger was the perfect predator in a world that no longer existed. One by one they fell, not in glorious duels but in exhaustion. Engines failed. Tracks broke. Crews abandoned their tanks when the fuel ran out. Some fought on foot with pistols and grenades beside the burned shells of their machines. The IS-2s did not stop. They rolled over the wrecks of their enemies, through the suburbs of Berlin, through streets littered with ash and corpses, until at last they reached the Reichstag. There, in the final days of April 1945, the flag of the Soviet Union rose above the ruins. The war in Europe was over. The age of the heavy tank had ended. In the aftermath, the world studied what these two machines had represented. The Tiger II was an engineering marvel, a fortress of precision, unmatched in firepower and protection. But it was too complex, too heavy, too demanding. It consumed fuel that Germany no longer had, manpower that was gone, and time that could not be spared. It was the embodiment of a dream that could not survive reality. The IS-2, by contrast, was the symbol of endurance. It was crude, yes, its welds rough, its comfort non-existent. But it was reliable, adaptable, and easy to build in numbers. It was a weapon of victory because it existed in the world that war had created, a world where simplicity and mass could defeat perfection. After the war, both tanks would influence generations to come. The Tiger II became the template for post-war Western armor, inspiring designs like the British Centurion, the American M103, and even the Leopard decades later. Its lessons were clear. Protection and firepower mattered, but mobility and logistics mattered more. The IS-2 evolved into the IS-3 and eventually the T-10, the last of the Soviet heavy tanks before the concept itself was abandoned. Soviet designers learned that wars were no longer won by steel alone, but by the balance of industry, doctrine, and innovation. And so the giants faded. They rusted in museums, in forests, in the ruins of Europe, reminders of a time when men believed the heaviest armor could shield them from defeat. But beyond the metal, their story endures, a story of two nations at war not only with each other, but with their own ideals. Germany's Tiger II fought for perfection. The Soviet IS-2 fought for survival. Both were magnificent. Both were doomed. And when they finally met, the world witnessed the end of an era, the last true duel of the heavy tanks. In the years that followed, new machines would rise. Faster, lighter, smarter. But none would ever again carry the same weight, the same raw, terrifying presence, as those that rumbled across Europe in 1944 and 1945. The Tiger II and the IS-2 were not just tanks. They were monuments to the limits of human ambition, and to the brutal genius of a war that consumed everything it touched. When their engines fell silent, so too did the age of the armored giant. The battlefield would never sound the same again.